Hello, everybody. This is Joseph Pisek, and welcome to the Fired Up Network. Welcome to Firedup Extra. Welcome to the broadcasting legend, Storm Norm Rumack. This weekend, we had another disappointing weekend. And if you're a big sports fan, as Ken Dryden passed away at the age of 78 due to cancer. I know him, but probably Norm can speak very well of Ken Dryden. Ken Dryden, of course, famous goaltender for Montreal Canadiens. You see Montreal Canadiens ice there behind you, the stall, Ken Dryden stall. And of course, he was the president of the Maple Leafs for a few years. And I met him a couple times. I'm sure you met him a couple times. If there's a definition of class act, Norm, it's Ken Dryden. And this guy may have been the smartest hockey player in the world. Go ahead, Norm.
Yeah, absolutely. You're bang on both points. He was certainly one of the smartest. He went to Cornell Law School, Cornell University in upstate New York. And I got to know him as an executive with the Maple Leafs in the late 1990s. I think it was around 97 when he first joined Toronto in an executive capacity. I got to observe him as a young teenager when he was called up to the Montreal Canadiens for the 71 playoffs against the Boston Bruins, who were heavily favored. They had Bobby Orr, Phil Esposito, and a long list of, high quality, high impact players, future Hall of Famers. And but certainly Orr and Esposito and the Bruins had set all kinds of scoring records, if I'm not mistaken. I could be a little bit off, but they set records in that 71 season. And the Bruins were heavily favored to knock off the Montreal Canadiens, and especially with a rookie goalkeeper coming up from U.S. college hockey. Dryden was big, but nobody knew a lot about him. And the scene I never forget, Montreal did win that series, knocking off the Boston Bruins. And the thing that I never forgot about that series was Phil Esposito, who was such a gifted scorer, was so frustrated at one point with Dryden's ability to shut down the heavily favored Boston Bruins, that Esposito just took his stick and in a moment of frustration just slammed it on the crossbar of the Montreal net. Not in a way, in terms of Dryden, but just in terms of his frustration with not being able to score more often. And that put that series, the 71 series with the Boston Bruins, which Montreal prevailed, put Dryden and the Canadiens on the map. And Montreal went on to win that Stanley Cup. I believe it was they beat Chicago in a Stanley Cup final that year. I'm pretty sure it was 71 when that happened. That was one of Scotty, if I'm not mistaken. Oh boy, I mean, this is a long time ago, right? I think that was one of Scotty Bowman's teams.
Older than me, 71.
Or I could be wrong. Scotty may have come in a year later, but in any case, the story is about Dryden. I mentioned I got to know him as an executive with the Maple Leafs, and we had a bit of a rapport because I also went to an American school, Syracuse. What's that?
Never mind. What was that school?
Yeah. So anyway, so we had a bit of a rapport talking about U.S. colleges and U.S. college sports. And he would, when I would see him in the intermissions during Leaf games then at Maple Leaf Gardens, we would talk about, a number of things, not just hockey, actually, we usually talked about more U.S. college sports than we did about the Maple Leafs in general. And I would ask him, for his recollections about being an all-time great goalkeeper and an all-time great Montreal Canadian and whatnot. And he was you talk about what a class act he was. He was so down to earth, easy to talk to. Some executives, you talk to them, there's a certain, you have a reverence for their position. But Ken Dryden always made everybody feel comfortable in talking with him, just like a regular guy, Yeah. And he became involved in politics as a member of parliament, a liberal member of parliament, if I'm not mistaken. And, he was... He didn't have the ego that went along with an all-time great goalkeeper and an all-time great Montreal Canadian and a Hall of Famer. He just was this down-to-earth guy that you could talk to and just have a casual conversation with, right? In spite of the important role he had in Maple Leaf sports and entertainment at that time. Well, at that time it was just Maple Leafs and Maple Leaf Gardens. But yeah, he was a serious guy, but he had an easy style of communication. So he talked about, as you referenced, Joe, and being class act, sort of guy that anybody could have a conversation with. And he'll, when people pass, we talk about, not only the things that they did very well and their greatness. In Ken's case, his goalkeeping magic, and it was magic with the Montreal Canadiens, but also just the easy, down to earth guy he was to talk to. And we always remember how did people treat us? And he treated me as well as anybody. So I'll go along and say amen to, and God rest his soul, about the class act that he was, Joe. You're spot on with that. Very intelligent, very down to earth, very nice to talk to, a real gentleman. And he'll be sorely missed, that's for sure. Just I was sad to hear about his passing from cancer, but yeah, he was an all-time great and a great person for sure.
And another thing about, like I told you, he may have been the smartest guy who played professional hockey, as you mentioned. He's a lawyer, and then went to the president, being an all-star, great for Montreal back, in 80 and all that. You ever think of taking the presidency job of your famous team or famous rival, the Maple Leafs? That says enough for him too.
Well, sure. I mean, anybody would want to have Ken Dryden involved in their organization. You can learn so much from him, and the classy way that he operates is just the perfect to my way of thinking. And I met a lot of nice executives. Cliff Fletcher is another one, who's also very powerful man, but I found him very easy to deal with, and had a sense of humor, and you could joke around with him. But yeah, Ken Dryden was that kind of person who would make anybody, he reminds me of, in a way, Joe, is Mike Pinball Clemens. Mike Pinball Clemens, the Argos former great player and coach, and now, an executive as well. Mike is that down to earth guy who makes you feel like $1 million, because when he's talking to you, his eyes are focused exactly on you. There could be like 1,000 people around him, looking at him. Yeah, he treats everybody with great respect, and I found Ken Dryden to be the same way. So in some ways, the late Ken Dryden reminds me of Pinball Clemens. They operate on the same level, in that sense.
All right. Again, he passed away at the age of 78 because of cancer, and dare I say, there's nobody like Ken Dryden. Norm, final thoughts, and tell everybody how they get a hold of you.
Yeah, well, I'm fortunate and blessed enough to be here on the Fired Up Network, a regular guest with my friend Joseph Pasek. We talk all the sports, you name it, we talk it, whether it's NHL, NBA, NFL, CFL, footy, or it's soccer if you prefer. Wrestling, Joe has incredible contacts. He knows the likes of, and friends with the likes of Bill Goldberg, and he knows The Rock. So I'm fortunate to be associated with Joe and be great friends with Joe for several decades already. He has great connections, and he brings some of these people on the air on occasion, which is pretty rare. Kind of people that you'd probably never get on most shows, right? And Joe has those great connections. So I'm really blessed to be on the Fired Up Network, and you can catch us. Sometimes it's different days, but we cover all the sports that you want to cover. So whether it's baseball, football, hockey, soccer, if you prefer, or footy, we've got it all, and tennis, lacrosse. So whatever your tastes are in sports, good chance you're going to find it right here on the Fired Up Network with Joseph Pasek and a lot of great guests.
And next year, I promise, Norm is going to hurry hard. He's going to be covering curling. All right, next year, Norm, get ready.
Nothing wrong with that. I love curling. It's a lot of fun to watch.
All right, this has been Fired Up Extra. Our thoughts on the late, great goaltender, mostly for the Montreal Canadiens, Ken Dryden. Thanks a lot, Norm.
My pleasure.